This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this first edition of CBN NewsWatch for Tuesday, April 30th. I'm Ephraim Graham. And ahead today, an Army veteran who converted to Islam is arrested and accused of planning a terrorist attack. A coup attempt in Venezuela as the opposition leader takes to the streets with soldiers. Are frozen embryos property or people? We're going to explore what the Supreme Court could be deciding on that question. We're also going to take a look at the important role faith and religious belief played in the creation of Western civilization. And we're going to hear about what can be done to prevent and even reverse the early symptoms of Alzheimer's. All those stories and much more are ahead today in this very first edition of CBN NewsWatch. We want to begin, though, with authorities arresting a 26-year-old U.S. Army veteran, accusing him of planning terror attacks in California. Mark Stephen Domingo served in Afghanistan. He's suspected of plotting to detonate a bomb at a Long Beach rally over the weekend. Federal prosecutors say Domingo converted to Islam and wanted revenge for the New Zealand mosque attacks. Investigators say he discussed his deadly plans with undercover agents he met online.
The terror plot culminated with plans to bomb innocent people, causing dozens of deaths and serious injuries.
Meanwhile, in the deadly shooting at a Southern California synagogue in Poway, residents mourn the loss of 60-year-old Lori Gilbert Kay. Friends say she stepped in front of the rabbi to stop the accused gunman, 19-year-old John Ernest. The FBI says it received a tip about a threatening social media post about 5 minutes before that attack on the synagogue. Mark Martin is following both of these stories and joins us now with more on the cases. So, Mark, let's begin with that arrest in the terror plot involving the rally over the weekend. What led to the arrest of Mark Stephen Domingo?
Yeah, the FBI says, Ephraim, that Mark Stephen Domingo lives in Reseda, California, and they say that they took him into custody a short time after he received what he believed were explosives from the undercover agents. Now, he allegedly purchased several hundred 3-inch long nails that he wanted to be used as shrapnel, specifically because the nails were long enough to puncture the human body and human organs. So very disturbing what the FBI is saying about this young man.
So difficult to hear that. What else is the FBI saying, and who were the targets of Domingo?
Yeah, good question. He was allegedly targeting Jews, churches, and then also police officers. And in addition to a Long Beach rally of white supremacists, he also wanted to detonate a bomb at the Santa Monica Pier. Again, that's according to the FBI.
What's Domingo's family saying, if anything?
Well, they're saying that they're surprised by all of this and they want their privacy. No further comments from them.
Now let's talk about that deadly incident in the shooting at the synagogue over the weekend as well. We've learned more about the accused gunman, a 19-year-old John Ernest.
Yes, he's being described as a star athlete, a scholar, even a nationally known pianist. So very disturbing what we're hearing here about Ernest. Again, the alleged accusation or the accusations against him. The Associated Press reports that his adherence to white supremacy and anti-Semitism shocked those closest to him, Ephraim.
Are we hearing anything from the 19-year-old's parents?
Yes, once again, they're saying that they're surprised by this, and they released a statement saying, quote, "How our son was attracted to such darkness is a terrifying mystery to us," end quote.
Reported that the FBI received a tip just minutes before the attack. Tell us about that.
Yes, the FBI says that they received a tip about a threatening social media post about 5 minutes before the attack, but they say that the tip did not identify the writer of the post or the location of the threat. The FBI says they immediately tried to identify the writer of the post, but it was too late. By that time, the attack had already taken place. Ephraim.
All right, busy day, Mark. Thank you so much for following these stories for us. A strong response from Israel Monday to that shooting attack on the San Diego synagogue. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations is demanding action by the international community against anti-Semitism.
The time for talking and having a conversation is over. What Israel and the Jewish community around the world demands is action, and now. It is simple. Those who engage in anti-Semitism must be punished, whether it's here at the UN, political leaders, editors, policy pundits, or college professors. It doesn't matter. Anti-Semitism should have no place in our society until it becomes criminal. This bigotry will persist it will fester, and it is only a matter of time until it erupts again in violence and bloodshed. It is unacceptable that worshippers should look back while they are praying.
Ambassador Dannon also shared his support for the anticipated peace plan from the Trump administration, which is expected to be received in the coming weeks. Here now is a quick look at some of the other headlines we're following for you today inside the CBN newsroom. Venezuela's government has stopped a reportedly small coup attempt by military traitors working with right-wing opponents. This word comes from the government after opposition leader Juan Guaido called for a military uprising in a video that showed him surrounded by heavily armed soldiers. The Trump administration is pushing to issue an order designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization. It comes from the New York Times, and the move would bring American economic and travel sanctions against the group. The idea is being debated within the administration. NASA and various scientific experts are going through their latest drill this week on what the government agencies would do in the case of an asteroid strike. The plans will be released to the public via social media. The experts run this exercise about every 2 years. The Connecticut Supreme Court will hear a case that could decide if a frozen embryo is a human being or the property of a married couple which could be distributed with other assets in the case of a divorce. The case could go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it comes as the High Court is already looking at cases involving that very question. Are fertilized embryos people or property? The court's decision could lead to a change in the state of legalized abortion in America. Paul Strand now reports from the U.S. Supreme Court.
Recent cases involving the fight over the fate of frozen fertilized embryos show another example of our divided nation. For instance, an Arizona court ruled an ex-wife could give birth to her frozen embryos despite her ex's objections, while a Colorado court decided in favor of an ex-husband, stating embryos could be treated like property and thrown away. The U.S. Supreme Court has been asked to take the Colorado case and rule the frozen embryos are persons with a right to life.
You may not think it matters whether embryos are considered people, but if the law here in America decides that they are, or even if it decides they aren't, it has major implications.
Constitutional law attorney Jenna Ellis warns about a ruling that embryos are mere property.
So I think we're getting into very dangerous ethical and legal questions if the court decides to go that way.
We are commodifying human life. We are commodifying what it means to be human, and I think that has devastating consequences.
David Christensen of the Family Research Council points to the court's 1973 decision allowing abortion.
Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton legalized abortion, and now we have 60 million unborn children that have been killed. There's no question about the impact on families and family dynamics and the way we view each other and the way we view unborn children.
Ellis says ruling embryos are property could potentially expand to other stages of life.
At what point does that arbitrary line go from fertilized embryos at merely the conception stage, then all the way to, say, someone who's in a coma at the end of their life? Are they then morphed into property because they don't have any decision-making autonomy?
Rather than looking at human embryos as property, we should look at them as they are, a member of the species Homo sapien, and they should be protected.
Pro-choice advocates worry declaring embryos persons with rights could end up stripping adults of their right not to be a parent. Ellis believes the issue is more fundamental. It's about life itself.
This is a really great opportunity for the Supreme Court to recognize that human life is human life, no matter how tiny and small.
Could that then shake the so-called right to abortion?
We're seeing with advanced technology that human beings are human beings, even in the womb, no matter how small. And I think that Roe's days are numbered, and we're going to see a pro-life win at the Supreme Court very, very soon.
Paul Strand, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
Suicide is at a 19-year high among children ages 10 to 17. That comes after the release of the Netflix drama 13 Reasons Why, which showed a girl ending her life. Researchers admit they cannot prove a connection, but they do say there were 195 more youth suicides than would have been expected in the 9 months after the show came out in March of 2017. The lead author of the findings, Jeff Bridge, at Nationwide Children's Hospital, says the creators of the series intentionally portrayed the suicide of the main character with a very graphic depiction of her suicide death. He says seeing that alone can trigger suicidal behavior. Coming up, a leading conservative voice tells CBN News what made Western civilization so great, and he says faith was a key factor. We'll hear from Ben Shapiro when we come back. Stay with us.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to his children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
And welcome back. Ben Shapiro is a leading young conservative known for his forthright views and his new book, The Right Side of History. Shapiro takes a deep dive into what made the Western world great. He points out faith tops the list. CBN's Jenna Browder has the story.
Ben Shapiro can certainly draw a crowd. And sometimes protests, like this one at the University of California, Berkeley. But he doesn't let that stop him from sharing his conservative views.
The reason that I am here is because fascism does not own this university.
And oftentimes running intellectual circles around just about everyone he goes up against.
Ben, talk about what it's like when you go to some of these college campuses. You spark a pretty big reaction.
Yeah, I think that there's a willing attempt to undermine the very basis of what I stand for. People deliberately lie about what it is that I am saying. People will suggest that, for example, I'm a white supremacist when I am militantly anti-white supremacist.
In fact, the 35-year-old Harvard-educated lawyer is devout in his Jewish faith.
The attempt to paint me as some sort of racist, the attempt to paint me as some sort of bigot, or somebody who wants to hurt other people, I'm some sort of fascist. Those lies are the way that the left avoids the debate, unfortunately. The hard left avoids the debate anyway.
The debate is something he doesn't shy away from, and in his new book, The Right Side of History, he makes his case for how Judeo-Christian values and Greek natural law made the West great.
You say this book is really about two things. It's about two mysteries. The first is, why are things so good? And the second, why are we blowing it? Explain what you mean.
So we live in the most prosperous time in human history, a time when a baby born can expect to live past the year 80. A time when virtually no one is living in starvation conditions in the West, when virtually everybody can expect to have a long, healthy life, when racial tolerance is at an all-time high, when freedom is at an all-time high. So how did things get so good? How did we end up here? Because 2 centuries ago, everybody was dying in nasty, brutish, and short fashion. So what exactly changed is question number one. And number two is, why are we so angry at each other amidst the most glorious conditions ever lived in by any human beings at any time? And the answer is, we have to investigate the roots of our civilization.
He says the reason we're tearing each other apart is because we've forgotten the foundations that brought us together.
And those foundations, I contend, in the right side of history, lie, one, in Judeo-Christian ethics, and two, lie in Greek teleology, the idea that we can apply reason to the universe and come up with good moral answers and scientific answers to the conditions that surround us. So that combination, the push and pull between human reason and divine revelation, that push and pull created the West. We have tried forcibly, in many cases, to undermine both of those bases for Western civilization. Then we're surprised when we return to the chaos that preceded them.
And it's that chaos he's trying to fight against on his radio and podcast show, cable news, and columns he writes for the Daily Wire, which he founded.
Ben, how does moral purpose play into all of this? You say we've really abandoned this as Americans.
Well, I mean, there are two perceptions of moral purpose that tend to merge in the West. Perception number one is that it is your job to serve God, that God put you on the planet not to serve your own ends, but to serve his ends. And this is in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the idea of revelation, that God gave you a moral purpose and that you have to live out that morality if you want to fulfill the purpose for which you were put on planet Earth.
And perception number two, Greek tradition, which he says suggests we all have the capacity for reason, and that, paired with virtue, is what it means to be human. In the West, he says these two perceptions merged.
So the idea was that serving God was serving reason at the same time, and that the push and pull between those two, applying reason to Judeo-Christian morality and applying Judeo-Christian morality as the fundamental foundations of reason, that is how you get to human rights, that's how you get to science, that's how you get to the idea that we ought to have political discussions, that's how you get to democracy as opposed to dictatorship, that the push and pull, the tension between these two poles is what creates the bridge upon which Western civilization sits.
As for why Christians should be especially interested,
I mean, I think the reason they should buy the book is because it gives a rationale for why Judeo-Christian values lie at the root of Western civilization. Because what we're hearing from all of our relatives is that you're an idiot if you believe in Revelation at Sinai or the Sermon on the Mount, that you're a fool if you believe the tenets of Judeo-Christianity, that if you believe any of those values, that you're basically a dunce, and that we could come to all these values on our own. This book is a ringing rebuke to that notion. You do need to make certain fundamental assumptions about the nature of the universe that are rooted in a God-based, orderly universe if you actually want to have a Western civilization worth fighting for and preserving.
He does.
Threatening to lock up journalists.
I needed 600 officers to protect me at Berkeley.
And puts himself on the front line leading that charge. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Still ahead, a leading expert tells CBN News despite failures in attempts to cure Alzheimer's, there's still hope for reversing the symptoms people in the early stages are facing with the dreaded disease. We'll have that interview right after this.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
No super balls, man. Come with...
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
Testing has stopped on what were once two promising Alzheimer's drugs because they didn't work. At the same time, the Journal of the American Medical Association is warning against over-the-counter supplements claiming to cure Alzheimer's. But rest assured, there's still hope. Studies show the Bredesen protocol can significantly reverse symptoms in people in the early stages of the disease. CBN's health reporter Lori Johnson spoke with Dr. Dale Bredesen on this week's Healthy Living program.
So there are hundreds, and we just actually published a paper showing 100 people who all have documented improvement, where we have cognitive testing before, cognitive testing after, and some of these people also had quantitative EEGs that showed improvement. Others also had MRI volumetrics, so actually looking at volumes of their hippocampus and their brains, showing improvement. So it's been many at this point, and a growing number.
Well, we know that your first research, which was published, dealt with 19 success stories. Recently, you published another paper that had 100 success stories, but you say thousands of people are on your protocol. Talk about some of them.
Right, and we don't have data on all of them because we've trained now over 1,500 physicians in 10 different countries and all over the U.S. So some of these people aren't telling us necessarily before and after on everyone. But we have, as you said, thousands of people on this. We have recently a person, for example, from overseas who went from a MoCA score of 3. And to give you an idea what that means, MoCA goes from 0 to 30. Normally, you would have scores typically 28, 29, 30, and it tests your memory and it tests your understanding of, naming animals, drawing a clock, things like that, repeating sentences, remembering things for several minutes, things like that. And this person scored a 3, which means very late stage. The average for all Alzheimer's patients is 16.2. So this person was very far, and actually she's now scoring at 20. So this is a huge change, and we see this. And of course, we don't see it in every single person. And that's one of the things we're trying to understand. Why do some people do so well and some people not do as well? We do know coming in earlier is better. Starting earlier is definitely better. But we're seeing improvements in speech, improvements in memory, improvements in engagement, interaction, all sorts of things.
And you say Sally, who is a wonderful success story, her score is also still very high and has been very high for a number of years.
Right. So she started out with a 24, which is MCI. So that's on the way to Alzheimer's, and very clearly had abnormalities, as well as had a PET scan that showed definitively that she had Alzheimer's disease. And her score is now perfect 30.
Wonderful. And, your Alzheimer's protocol is doing so well when at the same time we see that some of these Alzheimer's drugs are failing. Is there any other hope out there?
It's a good point. And of course, aducanumab was the big hope that we all had, and that just failed a few weeks ago. So there hasn't been anything. And part of the problem here is that what our research shows is that what is actually driving the phenomenon of Alzheimer's, which typically the doctors are not checking, unfortunately, is that there are many things, from insulin resistance to leaky gut to systemic inflammation, for example, to toxin exposure. These all play a role, and for most people it's multiple. And of course, a drug only gets at one of these things. It doesn't get at all of them. So it's really important to look at the actual root causes of the problem, and then if you have several, you want to address all of those. So our hope is that in the future, the drugs, which I think are going to be very helpful ultimately, would be tested on the backbone of a program that addresses the actual cause. Because right now, of course, the doctor isn't giving you something that actually addresses the cause of your Alzheimer's.
And you're seeing people develop Alzheimer's at younger ages than ever before, right?
I have been so surprised to see that. When I was training, we were typically seeing people who were in their 70s and 80s. Now we are routinely seeing people who are in their 50s who are developing Alzheimer's. In fact, it's so surprising that often they'll think, well, this can't be Alzheimer's because I'm too young. We even see people in their 40s sometimes.
The Bredesen protocol tests people for 36 causes of Alzheimer's, and depending on the results of that test, involves a tailor-made treatment. Usually that involves changes in diet, exercise, and reducing exposure to certain toxins. Now, you can learn more on this week's edition of Healthy Living. It begins at 9:30 Eastern. That is this evening on the CBN News Channel. Coming up, how CBN's Operation Blessing is helping sick and poor people in the South American nation of Peru. Stay with us.
as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
CBN's Operation Blessing is helping the sick and poor in Peru. Juana has dedicated her life to creating pottery and ceramics in the Peruvian community of Padracocha. But when she began providing for her grandson, she struggled because of lack of supplies and poor quality equipment that endangered her health, actually. Thankfully, Juana and her grandson both got the tests and treatments they needed at a medical clinic by Operation Blessing. OB Peru also provided her ample supplies to increase her business and lessons to learn some new techniques. Now, you can find out more about what Operation Blessing is doing around the world by visiting its website. It's ob.org. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. Here's a message I hope will encourage you and move you to post, tag, tweet, and share with those in your circles. God's favor is on your life. Don't try to explain it. The world may say it is not your time, but His favor says it is your turn. With that word, make today a terrific Tuesday. That is a wrap for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more on the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. And you can now watch CBN News programs anytime throughout the day on the CBN News channel. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We certainly pray you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a terrific Tuesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow, everybody.